Can you hear me? Okay. So it's kind of awkward because I have to go back and forth, say slide forward, so maybe slide forward. So quickly, I sound American, but I'm not. You'll dispute with me, but I was actually born in France in a little place called Auvergne. And I bring it up because I'm back in Spain, 18 months living here, but I also work in Cannes, which is 2 hours from where my father was born and where I grew up as a child. However, next slide. Without question, I'm American. And I think that plays a lot into where my beliefs are and where I see opportunities for, especially in Spain, what's different between America and Spain are a lot of things. And right now, I'll kind of walk you through some big changes of where consumers are spending time, and as marketers, where we want to go find those consumers to deliver our messages. Next slide, please. So already described, the takeaway here is I kind of oscillate, complicated word. I go back and forth between small companies and big companies. I've been fortunate that a lot of the small companies I've worked at have been bought by big companies. And unquestionably now I'm in a very big company, and we'll walk you through that in a moment. Next slide, please. My role as a plumber. So most of the companies with which I've worked has been in the back end of things. There are some exceptions, of course. I worked at ESPN, which is very consumer-centric. But even when I was at Yahoo, most of what we created around marketing platforms was behind the scenes. And so I've had the privilege of running marketing campaigns and knowing what it means to find consumers. But a lot of the technology and a lot of the platforms are where the consumers are. It's what's really interesting to me. And that B2B environment is what really makes me excited. Next slide, please. With that, I'm at a company based and headquartered, many of my colleagues here, from Amadeus in Madrid. And this company is probably one of the largest travel companies you don't know. Yeah, great results today. Buy the stock. No, I'm not allowed to say that. So publicly traded in Spain, 20 billion euro market cap, 3 billion annual turnover in terms of revenue, 15,000 people. It's a big company. And with that comes a lot of challenge and a lot of opportunity. But our focus is really helping the traveler. 1 billion of you every year travel around the world that we have the privilege of touching in one point or another, whether it's through an airport, through a boarding pass, through actually buying a ticket. And we look at it from a full circle. And I put this up here because we'll come back to this and how chat is really changing this environment and these new platforms of chat. Everything from inspiration, booking, what happens while you're on the trip, what happens after the trip, everything is changing. Next slide, please. So marketing versus advertising. I have to be honest, I did not know the difference till I did it today. So I'll read it. The action of businesses promoting and selling products or services, including market research and advertising. So marketing is more inclusive. When you think about it, in most companies, there's a CEO, a CIO, a CTO, and a CMO. There's not really a CAO, right? There's not really a chief advertising officer. However, advertising, which is the activity or the profession of actually producing advertisements, whether they make you laugh or cry, is that responsibility of an advertiser. And they work hand in hand together. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite slides. So John Wanamaker, well, one, you'll never forget the name. I want to make her happy. I want to make her rich. Like, you'll never forget the name, Wanamaker, is literally what I think this institution stands for. He's among one of the first interesting entrepreneurs in America. In 1838, he was born. He's responsible for creating the first department store in Philadelphia. He's responsible for what we take for granted now, which is creating the price tag. The actual notion of a price tag did not exist in the 1800s. He created the concept of singular pricing, not like in China where everything's a bargain, or you're bargaining. And he also created the concept of money-back guarantee. But why was he an entrepreneur? He was the first ever to give perks, including sharing into the stock, into privileges like recreation, into lunches, into healthcare. In 1860, he created all this. So I did not know that either, because what he's most known for is a very provocative statement, which is half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. The problem, I don't know which half. And that's truthful. As best you can be as a marketer, as most astute you can focus on finding your targeted advertisement and targeted customer, you're gonna make a miss. And it's learning about those misses that's the most important thing, to know where do people actually respond to your product and where do they ignore it. And so quite astute in the 1800s to have had that statement that to this day we use this constantly in the advertising industry. Next slide, please. So today, why I call this title Chat, 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 which is impossible to say 3 times fast, is actually cha-cha-cha. Is obviously a rhythm to it. There's a little memoric to it. There's no correlation to dancing, although I've tried. I really tried. How can I squeeze chat, chat? I can't. So other than it's something you'll remember as a speech, I hope, I want to walk you through 3 things. 1 is the history of chat. 2 is the evolution into what I believe is actual computing platforms. And then thirdly, most importantly, the business behind it and why it's relevant for marketing. So next slide, please. So I think half of you are under 30, but I find this kind of whimsical. Back then, which would have been 8 years ago, you'd say, wow, you can even use this to send text. And the person's like, why the fuck would I send a text? I'll just call. And nowadays, wow, you can even use these phones to make phone calls. Well, why would I send a phone call when I can make a text, right? And that's me. I think, Crystal, you've called me. I don't do phone calls. I'm a texter, and that's just what I do. And just push forward. There's a little completion to the slide. So when polled, and millennials are obviously 30 and younger, 41% felt they'd be completely satisfied if they can connect with the business primarily through text. And we'll see some evidence to that in the forthcoming presentation. Next slide. Who possibly knows what these screens look like? Oh, come on, really? These are, okay, I know you, but. So this is like the most ubiquitous, now dead phone company in the world, Nokia's S40 system, which when you look at it, did a few things well, right? It did texting. And when you look at your own lives, more likely than not, your phone awakens you to when something is there. And it's usually email, recently Facebook notifications, Facebook message, and most certainly since the 2000s, text messaging. And at some point, text messaging became incredibly popular and incredibly profitable for the companies that ran it semi-monopolistically. And these are the telcos. I don't know if Telefonica is in the room, but thank goodness they're probably not. But these guys just milked the cow, to use an American expression, because there was no alternative. Yet, it satisfied two-way communication, one-to-one. That's all it did. Very simple. Next slide, please. Then the Asians, and I'll lead to why I've used them as a racial, if you will, and geographic presence in a moment, they're graphical for a number of reasons, not the least of which to try to dare put Chinese characters, Korean, Japanese characters in an interface back then that was even more kludgy than the current phones that we have, of course. It's complicated. So the Asians began, this is a 2012 environment with China Southern Airlines, where effectively you're mirroring if you called China Southern Airlines directly. So it's still prompting with basic numerical responses. You're not doing natural language. You're not doing keyword invocations for responses. But it's the beginning of something different. You can see there's an emoticon, a dude's face. You can't really see it there. It's some cute little panda bear, because everything in Asia has something like that. But the point is that you went away from that very black and white Nokia presence. Next slide, please. And this was why. It was very primitive in those environments to really complete tasks anywhere thinking about commerce, anywhere thinking about marketing messages, not why it was created. So what happened? Next slide, please. If we return for a moment to the days of travel agents, which of course is core to where I work and some of my colleagues here, there's something which I thought for sure was a joke when I first joined, and I was being punked, again, to use an American expression, but it's true. It's called cryptic, and it's cryptic. So cryptic is a system where it's a green screen. If you've had any issue at any airport, no question the agent with whom you're speaking is using this behind the scenes. But I give the analogy where when's the last time you did a control C, Control V by the mouse. Like we all know copy paste. And it's a shortcut. And effectively, cryptic is a shortcut to when you know what you want, you get it. And that's what text messaging was all about. It was shortcuts. That's why we always have LOL, and all the different varieties that we know come from shortcuts. And when we look at what this was back in the 80s when first created, and still to this day present, we'll talk about this. And actually, the resurgence of cryptic codes, even in text, even when graphical, because of human nature's interest to shortcut where possible. Next slide, please. What changed? 2007, who was born? I'm kidding. So, she's so serious. The iPhone changed everything. The iPhone finally gave a mechanism to be graphical, to be richer, to go away from binary text back and forth. However, next slide, it had the tortilla chip effect. And I cannot take claim for this as much as I want. I read a wonderful blog that I think he should be credited for, named Dan Glover. But it's true. When's the last time you've ever had a tortilla chip? Just by itself. Maybe Edgar. Is Edgar in the room? No, maybe. From Mexico originally. But tortilla chips are, by themselves, nothing. And honestly, what was created in 2007 by the iPhone may sound fantastic at the surface. We've all had our lives changed better for that. But they're almost tortilla chips. Every single application in 2007, 8, 9, and even to this day are highly irrelevant. They taste nothing. They're tasteless. They need something behind them. Next slide, please. The tortilla is meant to get something. It's meant to get salsa. It's meant to get guacamole. And the applications are meant to get content. They're meant to get conversation. They're meant to get interaction. So as best as Apple completely changed the world, no question, and Samsung quickly copied after, and now unquestionably you have Apple versus Android, along the way, some things were lost. Along the way, these operating systems were losing opportunity because they were paving a new path, but that path still required conversation to some complicated back-end systems. So what happened as a result? Next slide. You had the beginning of embracing communication in simple formats, and then led by the Asians, you had realization we could do much, much more with chat applications. So when I look at chat, I look at three lenses. One is simply a mechanism to connect two individuals, and they're really people behind the scene. There's no bots, there's no artificial intelligence, we'll come back to that, but just to connect people. So at the moment, in every Starwood hotel around the world, this is in Sevilla, this is at the Alonso Tres, which is a very, very luxury hotel in the middle of Sevilla, you cannot access the Wi-Fi unless you read the following, which is an invitation, almost a begging, to WhatsApp me. Okay, so I decided to WhatsApp them. And I was in room 222. My friend Roxy was with me. So I tested this. I said, hey, we're kind of hungover. Let's get some toothbrushes and some ibuprofen. And that's what was kind of delivered. Apparently in Spain, you can't get ibuprofen, but you can get toothbrushes. But the point is the conversation started. Could I pick up the phone? Sure. Could I walk into someone? Yes, and ask. But a conversation continued for my 3-day stay there. And that changed my entire experience. Obviously, I conceded, hey, I'm from the hotel industry. I like to know what percentage of inquiries are around hospitality or concierge. It's about 60 that are around hospitality, toothbrushes, et cetera. 30% around, can I get this table at this restaurant? And 10% are just drunk people trying it. But the reality is that guy, Alfonso, is not leaving my phone. He's my friend. That hotel is now my friend. And it's an interaction that will be there. And occasionally it wakes up. What's up? It literally says, what's up? But at that point, it realizes I've checked out the hotel. Next slide, please. So this is another example. Those who know me know I'm very active on Swarm. I pretty much check in everywhere. So when I check in, I'm also simultaneously tweeting. So I went from London to Madrid in early April saying, wow, the security lines suck. And then boom, Heathrow said, hello, welcome to Heathrow. We're sorry to hear this. Can you let us know what terminal you're in? I responded. Then all of a sudden, we'll pass the info to the team, blah, blah, blah. Hope you enjoy Madrid. So it wasn't a canned response. The person knew I was going to Madrid. Enjoy Madrid. So some human obviously took time to interact with that. And that is powerful. When you're in a line that's 20 minutes and you're expecting to be 5, and to get that kind of conversation going, it really diminishes your anxiety. It makes you feel human. And that's exactly what chat does. Again, nothing exemplary here, no commerce, no marketing opportunities, but it's leading into what's coming and what already exists in Asia very prevalently. Next slide. So the evolution into a computing platform. Next slide, please. So this is one of the more meaty slides, no tortilla chip, sorry. But if you look what's really happened, 2010, no question, the catalyst was the iPhone right here, right? I mean, incomparable growth to smartphones. Obviously, the tablets, we all know, really over time will replace laptops and desktops. They're not really mobile devices, in my opinion. The other big thing that to take away here, 53% of the world, so half of the world that uses smartphones are in Asia. That's why we'll use some examples from them. And lastly, 2013, 84% traffic was effectively in social media when you had 4 billion active customers, migrating now half and quickly going in favor of messaging. So when you think of social media, you clearly think of Facebook's, Twitter's, and the like. But messaging platforms are coming so quickly. Next slide, please. One guy got it. One guy got it in 2014, Mark Zuckerberg. He paid $19 billion for an app called WhatsApp. All of us know it. All of us use it. You don't pay for it. You might have paid, depending on what time you came, for 99 cents at one point. Completely free. What did he see? He saw that graph before it was written. He saw the migration to messaging before it happened. Clearly a pioneer. Next slide, please. Facebook. Facebook has among the most penetrating social network, of course, with Facebook, but messaging platforms out there, and they're discrete. Facebook Messenger, I think, announced recently some 700 million users. WhatsApp, 1 billion. Instagram, still less than 1 billion. And you can do communication. However, they're meaningless. They're meaningless at the moment for marketing purposes, for commerce, and for what I'm about to show you. Because what happens was the Asians were fed up with the existing, quote-unquote, American Silicon Valley operating systems, which effectively is what Android and Apple were, and they innovated. They innovated not on any of these. Instead, next slide, they created their own. They created their own across 3, I can't say continents, of course, but country regions. First and foremost, China with WeChat. This number, by the way, of almost 700 million, that's not the number of users. That's not the number of downloads. The downloads is almost double that. That's the number guaranteed every month that many people use this. Line is in Japan, 215 million. And lastly, you've got, I can't pronounce it well, but Kakao Talk. 99% of Koreans use this application. And what are these? Are these messaging bots? Are they messaging platforms like I just showed you? No. They're much more. Next slide, please. So before we get there, we're not alone in aspiring to go outside of WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram. This company, Kik, which close to 300 million users in North America use, mostly 20 and under. Slack, the same individual who created, Yahoo bought it, what's it called? It was the first photograph thing, Flickr, created this company, which is a productivity tool. Our team uses it. Snapchat is for a lot of purposes, but pretty much disappearing messages, and also one of your favorite things, creating the, whatever those things are even, crazy special effects. And then Telegram, which is not out of the US, I apologize, that's out of Europe, but effectively the same thing as Snapchat. These are also adventing in less than 12 months, in less than 18 months in some cases, millions of users. Next slide. So what has caused this growth? If we go to the right and backwards, and we'll spend some time on this, WeChat effectively, as a little application on top of Android or iOS, or even older devices in some regions like BlackBerry, becomes a new operating system. It's a new computing platform. One can write applications to it. So when I gave the example of South Airlines China earlier, they wrote an application, effectively a robot, inside WeChat. And so you went from, again, one-to-one messaging, calling, texting, videoing, to group calls, which just recently Facebook Messenger now allows, to allowing customer service and marketing, the example I just gave with Heathrow Airport and Twitter, to payments, which we'll come to in a moment, and to retail, which is why we're all here. How you reach a customer, get them to transact, and interact with you as a permanent customer. So next slide, please. So the business. Next slide, please. So everyone gives incredible accolades to the amount of growth Facebook did versus anyone before it, et cetera, et cetera. To reach 100 million users, it took WeChat only 15 months. If you compare to Facebook, it took them almost 4.5 years. Twitter, a little bit around 4 years. Line, again, a Japan-specific effort, especially less than 2 years. Every one of these, and I think if you add KIK came in 8 months, the one in the United States. So if you look at the amount of money being made per application, and these are the application owners as example first, and then I'll show examples that what you do with these applications, these computing platforms. So in WeChat, they do everything. They do everything from ads, stickers, games, payments. You actually can pay with the actual WeChat application, and then mobile commerce. They're making $7 per user. You go down to WeChat, 6 cents. So incomparable opportunity. If I look at this as a financial analyst, I might buy Facebook stock right now, knowing fully well Facebook is not going to concede this in the long run. And that's not my message to take away here by any means. But you look at that delta, it's obviously something that they're aware of. $7 versus 6 cents. Just as an example at the high level, and now we'll come to, well, why? What's going on there? Next slide, please. So if you look at the feature set and a different scope, again, messaging, sharing, no problem, they all nail it. When you start going down to mobile commerce, coupons, abilities to do things with transportation, which of course is near and dear to my heart, it completely changes. One game in town, soon a second game, obviously, eventually a third game, and then the point today, 4th, 5th, 6th games. Everybody's going to follow this suit. Next slide, please. So this is the home screen blown up we saw earlier across all three. You can do everything from wealth management, getting movie tickets, buying cosmetics, doing the lottery, which you see obviously on Goya and every street around here, topping up your phone. Remember, it's still a phone. Utilities, ordering an Uber, transferring from an airport, everything. Are these individual apps that you see on your iPhone like Uber and PayPal? No, they're not. They're in the WeChat interface. They may be owned by WeChat, or they may be created by third-party companies that are startups. The startup ecosystem around these are quite significant. Next slide, please. One small company you might know, McDonald's. First physical shop, blah, blah, blah. First www, blah, blah, blah. M-commerce, app commerce. Now they have their own brand here. Everything from customer service in the case of Louis Vuitton, and actual payments. When you walk into any McDonald's in China, you don't even bring out your wallet. You just WeChat them. It's simple as that. You show them everything from a barcode to a text message back and forth, and you've paid for the product. And every single time that happens, WeChat is making money. And it's just a very simple way as a consumer to spend money. And as a marketer, what do you want? You want a consumer to spend money quickly with your product. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. As I said earlier, when I added the Alfonso trace to my WhatsApp, they're a friend, loosely, but the brands are friends. They show up just like my friends. So this is me talking to KLM Airlines, a one-on-one chat with TomTom. This is a clothing store, TripAdvisor. They just show up as friends. They don't show up as applications. They don't show up as messages, advertisements, banners. No, no, no. It's much more integrated. It's much more homely, and it's much more subtle. And it allows you to react when you wish. If you want to mute it, just like you're tired of a friend WhatsApping you, you can delete them, you can block them, you can mute them. You're in complete control as a consumer. And look at the similarities across all three. Do I show a screenshot here today for Facebook? No. They just launched 2 weeks ago, and I'll show some live demos in a second here. The ability to do bots, it is laughable. It's a great way to get content. I can do nothing with it. It's like, imagine you're really wanting to go away this upcoming holiday weekend, I think in 2 weeks, and you want to go to Granada, and you find this incredible airfare in Amadeus for 49 euros. I know, we're in fantasy land. It's not going to happen. But imagine you know that, and you can't act upon that. That's just foolish. So a lot of the American innovation is getting content out, but without the full circle of buying it, getting the boarding pass, and involving yourself in that ecosystem, it's useless. Next slide. So this is an example of TripAdvisor. I only have 4 of these. They're all in Chinese, sorry. But effectively, TripAdvisor's, to us, probably the Bible, collectively 100 million users around the world. This is the Chinese version, but it's where inspiration happens. Traditionally, when you're given any recommendation to any destination, you're probably going to TripAdvisor, in addition to asking your friends, just to benchmark. Okay, I like Lola's opinions, but where is this restaurant really in the list of things? Maybe 50, maybe 500, right? It's a benchmark play. They're all over WeChat. Next slide, please. China Southern Airlines, I gave the example before. And I'm not going to dwell on all these, but if you look back to the original circle that we spoke about, from inspiration to booking to in-trip to post-trip, what we're monitoring at the company I work is where are these fulfilling the different roles that we, as a provider of information technology to these kinds of companies, where do we play? Where do we catch up? And where do we innovate? Next slide, please. Shangri-La Hotel, you can get your coupons, you can get the facilities, you can book restaurants, you can pay through credit card in this case, and eventually you'll be able to pay through WeChat. Next slide, I think, is the one I really like. Next slide, sorry. The other next. Forward. There we go. So this one. And Starwood Hotels had this a long time ago, only for the W, and you have to download the app to use it. It's very cumbersome. Any hotels in China, you can create a WeChat channel. You can not only check in, so you can definitely book, and you can search and book. That's boring now. You can check in, you can get your boarding pass, in this case, your key, as a text message from WeChat. And you go to your door, and it opens the door. You don't have to speak to anybody. You don't have to interact with any payment, any credit card. It's all seamless. And that is quite an elegant experience, especially in China, where you don't want confrontation, and a lot of Chinese are often confrontational. That's just their culture. They like to bargain. This just circumvents a lot of hassle. And this is something that any hotelier can do very simply today in China and anywhere WeChat operates. Next slide. So there's a lot of Internet of Things. I won't dwell on this, but effectively in WeChat, you probably heard a lot of these companies. Apple bought Nest for $1.2 billion, blah, blah, blah. I can control the air conditioning. I can control the television. I can control my health. Everything is connected. We always talk about the Internet of Things and connectivity. In WeChat, part of your agreement to publish your content, to allow commerce to happen on that platform, is you share data. And we talk about data a lot in Amadeus, but to share data so readily that it knows and it takes the number of steps I did. I walk by a soda machine, it has beacons, it offers me a Coke or an Aquarius, I can buy through WeChat. That crap ain't real. That crap is not fantasy, it's real. And WeChat's really defined what a closed ecosystem can accomplish. Next slide. And then lastly, interacting with offline. This is an example where I think, alluded to it. I can go to a soda machine, I can WeChat it, I get a code into a department store, I come to checkout. It's just super, super simple. I don't have to deal with credit cards or cash. Everything's on the phone. And next slide. So 2 examples. Let's see if this still works. This will be the miracle. So I go to AirPlay, someone said earlier. So I don't know if you can see this. Yeah. So one of the companies in America called The Atlantic, and I don't know how many have seen House of Cards recently. So those who know House of Cards, it's usually a dry subject, but it kind of made politics interesting. Well, The Atlantic faced the same issue in 2010, maybe a little earlier, and they came up with a whole new branding and a whole new approach called Quartz. Same publication, same content, but created differently. They were the first responsive website, means when they created it, it worked on tablets and on laptops and on mobile phones all at the same time. So they recently created one of the first, I think, intuitive, I call them chat zines. So this is now them speaking to me. Hopefully the internet works. There's always going to be something wrong, right? So, yeah, so it's talking. See how a bubble came up? So it says something about Modium, blah, 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 blah. Then I have an option next. Let's see. I got out of the way. And it's just like, it's like I'm talking to a human, and then I can do emoticons. Every so often, an ad will show up, usually relevant to the context. Can I type them now? No. I'll show that in a second. What's the problem? And if I actually see something interesting, eventually it draws me to the article. So obviously the whole point is to get readership into, there's the ad, or the meme, how many of us send little memes to each other. It's like I'm talking to a friend. And it's no different than if you had a friend who's a subject matter expert in chocolate, and you say, hey, what's the newest chocolate bar that's come up, or what have you eaten recently around chocolate? They'd send some meme. It's just a conversation. And it's very, very cool, very elegant. Another example I shared earlier was Kik. So Kik is a little more dry, buck kind of thing. But I go to the Weather Channel. It already knows I'm in Madrid. It has some instantly things that I can just type, 3-day forecast. As we know, it's raining now, and unfortunately raining up until Sunday, which is the Madrid Open. So I don't know if I can go. So I can type a message. I can say London forecast. This shit didn't work earlier, so let's see how bad it is. But I could talk weather all day, Well, no, you can't, because I type London and it doesn't work. So that's the problem. This is not some pilot. This is the Weather Channel, the #1 company in the world for weather on Kik, and it doesn't even get the basics right, which is if I type maybe London, England. Now I'm curious, since this is... By the way, none of this is our products, I should disclose. These are just other people's products. See, again, my mainframe didn't... What is the word mainframe? They're talking to someone who's under 20. A long way to go from what I just showed you, right? Opening a hotel room. And then lastly, I was going to show you a Facebook. The first one was Quartz. It's a standalone application. Like quartz, like a quartz, like a stone. Quartz. So there's Alana, there's Allie, Poncho's here. So Poncho is a little friend of mine who may be better than Weather Channel. So I go, hey, Poncho, what's up? London English. I'm like, the mind works in mysterious ways, right? So London, you can see my typing sucks. English, I keep saying English. Okay, let's see if it works. Oh, come on, help. I'm curious now, what am I supposed to type? Is it snowing? Is it raining in Madrid? Let's just do what it says. Is it raining? I'm just really curious. This works. And what's, please work. Oh, it's cloudy. Really helpful. I think it's raining. Dude, let's see what happens. Oh, he's thinking. Nah, it could be cloudy. So it's funny, but it's also distressing. This is the best products right now from the States that you have a one chance with consumers. And why would I go back, right? I don't have the opportunity to use WeChat because I don't speak Chinese, and unfortunately most people on there are in China. But it just shows the complete advancement difference. But it's not a trend to ignore. It's a trend to absorb. Someone earlier, I think, from South Africa had asked or suggested, he's here to look at startups, whatnot. I think something needs to be created that sits on top of all these platforms, right? Because it's going to become expensive. More will come. And to write 10 bots or 10 mechanisms to interact with consumers across all of them will be as time-consuming as even writing one between Android and Apple. So that transposition or translation layer, to me, seems an opportunity. And then clearly the stuff won't fail over time. I just can't believe Facebook will sit down and take this as acceptable. But it's just a fascinating trend. Commerce is happening faster than we can expect in mobile. everything we see internally at Amadeus suggests nothing but even more optimism for the space. And I appreciate your time allowing me to kind of convey one of my pet hobbies right now around cha-cha-cha. So thank you.